Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's workshop is on interview skills, a really, really important topic. And hopefully each and every one of you, if you haven't already been through an interview, you will be going through an interview. And hopefully after today's session with our special guest, Megan Farina from Deloitte, you'll be able to gain additional insights and additional tips into what employers are looking for, how you can prepare, and how you can set yourself apart from other students. So again, we're going to allow people to join in, but the next slide just gives you a little bit of our overview. Before I turn it over for Megan to introduce herself, we're just going to talk a little bit about the types of interviews that are out there. There's many, many types of interviews. Most of you will experience what we call the behavioral interview, and that's usually the first round of things. Talking a little bit about how you can better prepare for interviews, utilizing the STAR method when you're explaining a lot of your experiences. The sample interview questions, how to discuss your resume, what to bring, that's very important to an interview, as well as what to wear, and then how you follow up on things and how you should always send a thank you to the people that you meet, no matter what organization you're interviewing with. So those are just a little bit of things that we're going to go over. We're not going to go over every single slide. There are a lot of slides here today, but I will be sending it to each and every one of you after this session so that you will have it to refer to. But before we get fully started, I wanted to first introduce myself. My name is Jay Liwanag. I'm a career advisor here at the Costello College of Business. Prior to arriving here last semester, I could literally say I've hired and interviewed over 1,000 students in my career. And I've seen a lot of really, really good quality people. I've seen a lot of mistakes. I've seen a lot of success as well. And I'm really, really excited today to have Megan Farina with us from Deloitte. She brings with her an extensive amount of experience, and she's a really strong supporter of our school and our students. And I'm going to turn it over to her briefly so she can introduce herself.
Hi, as Jay said, my name is Megan Farina. I work for Deloitte as a specialist leader in the cyber strategy division. I've been there for almost 3 years now. And prior to that, I was an FBI agent working in cyber and counterterrorism in the state of New Jersey. Before that, I worked for Northrop Grumman and Booz Allen for a number of years in IT and consulting for military clients mostly. So I've got a lot of different experiences that have pulled together nicely after 20 plus years of working. And I love Deloitte. Like it's a wonderful firm to work for from a human perspective of really great teammates, people with great experience. Everybody dives into the work and works really hard together. But we mentor too. I have a number of mentees. Deloitte is big on mentoring. One of my mentees at George Mason is actually going to intern at Deloitte this summer. I'm very excited about that opportunity for her. And I also graduated from George Mason a number of years ago in decision sciences and management information systems, which has been changed into something new and bigger and brighter. And I love what George Mason has done over the years, and I love being able to give back. So I appreciate being here today, and I'm excited for you all to hear this interviewing skills session. I think there's a lot of great information here.
Great. Thank you, Megan.
Sure.
So feel free to stop both myself and Megan throughout this presentation. Again, we want to make this interactive, and we want to hopefully answer any questions that you might have throughout this. There's a lot of types of interviews that you're going to see. You can have now we're seeing a lot more pre-recorded interviews for the initial phase when they want to get to know you, get to know a little bit more information about you. So you might have something where you have to record your answers to a specific question or specific scenario. And I know some of you on this call have been in that situation already. There's also the virtual. Obviously, a lot of things are being done via Zoom and virtually to begin with. So you definitely could anticipate having that experience if you haven't already had that experience. Then one of the ones that all of us want to get to is the in-person one, because that allows us not only to see the individual in person, but also allows us to see the environment that we might be working at. And sometimes they will also, take you out to dinner or lunch. I know we did that at PwC, and I'm sure Deloitte has done that in the past as well. So those are things that allow you to, again, feel what it's like to be interviewing or working with the individual that you're interviewing with. Then there's the panel interview as well. That can be intimidating to some, but it also can be a great opportunity to really meet a lot of people and a variety of people from the organization and learn from that experience. And then there's the group interview where sometimes they'll have multiple individuals there, not only multiple individuals from the firm, but they might even have a group of you that are candidates and they want to see how do the candidates interact together and focus on watching you both behaviorally, how do you interact both verbally as well as non-verbally. Megan, are there any other types of interviews you've seen that are not listed?
I don't think so. Like you said, sometimes they do like a broader team together. They'll have like 5 or 6 or 7 people on one call, and you've never met each other, and so they kind of want to see the dynamics between you. But yeah, all of these I've definitely been a part of, and we'll dive into some of the in-person strategies, I think, a little bit later. But yeah, this is pretty comprehensive.
Great. Ryan, you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I'm curious, with each of these interviews, types of interviews, will there be a strategy for like each one of them that we'll discuss, or will it be
Uh, Great.
overall, or
Yeah, great question. I think it's going to be more overall. But you can always come to our office where if you have a specific type of interview, we can really focus and hone in on that. But I think for this session, it's going to be more of an overall interviewing as a whole.
thank you.
So to start, we'll talk a little bit about preparation. Preparation is really, really important for all types of interviews. Knowing and understanding what the industry is, the different product lines. So for instance, even Megan works in a specific division of Deloitte. And so there's a specific area that she's focused on. If you're interviewing with her organization, you want to understand what her organization is doing, but also what the big Deloitte is doing as well. So understand the industry and the product lines that you're going into for any type of interview that you do. So understand, look at what type, like we mentioned the types just earlier. So being prepared for, is it that case interview where I have to really understand more things technically? Is it the initial interview where it's just going to be focused mostly on behavioral? And so if I understand the type of interview, I can better prepare for it. New technologies. So what's impacting the industry? Kind of look at what's happening there. What are the new technologies that they're facing? Maybe you worked on a project in school where you use that new technology. The basic trends and the growth. So every organization, every company, every industry is going through different trends and different growth. So maybe even if they're going through a downfall right now, does that mean that they're going to have a downfall in 5, 10 years from now? Or are they just preparing for the uprise and what might be happening based on things that are happening in the economy? Major competitors, this is really key too. So you should know about the competitors of the organization. See what makes this organization stand out compared to their competitors. Searching all the different networking sites that are there. Look at LinkedIn. If I know that I'm interviewing with Megan, I'm going to look at her LinkedIn profile. I think she probably already knows that, or she maybe even expects that of me to look
I
at
was gonna,
that.
that's one of the things that I always did, even as an FBI agent, doing your background research is really, really important when you're walking into a conversation with someone who you've never met before, you know nothing about them. And you want to know, well, where did they go to school, or where are they working? Where have they previously worked? Where is any commonalities that I could have with this person to bring it up in conversation and build that rapport with this person so that they remember me as a person and not just as a resume.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Ryan, you have your hand raised again.
Yes, excuse me, I ask a lot of questions, but
That's good.
so when you're talking about LinkedIn and viewing the profile and connections, would you say that it would be more recommended to like if you apply for a job and you see that the recruiter looked at your profile, would you recommend first-handedly that you connect with them or
Let
Yeah, I think
Megan.
it's always helpful if you can find out who the recruiter is to reach out to them, if you are really serious about the role, because recruiters can be your biggest supporters. You won't always hear back from them, but it doesn't hurt to reach out. I've seen a lot of my colleagues do that as well. Once you have a certain level of experience, you kind of only want to work with the recruiters because you don't have a lot of time anymore because you're working so hard. But when you're first starting out, I think it doesn't hurt to try to expand your network and include some recruiters in that as well. And back to the preparation questions that we were talking about. Like, for example, you're going into an interview, say with Deloitte, and we just were involved with the Olympics. So that's a huge, huge thing that everybody knows is happening. But do a little homework on the company. What are they going through right now? What are they putting on out in the world? Like Jay said, what are their struggles? I heard that one day of putting on the Olympics for Deloitte is the equivalent of 7 Super Bowls. That's a lot. And trying to find out where you could fit into that, if you have the conversation early and show your enthusiasm, that's huge. Any employer is going to be like, wow, they really worked hard to prepare for this, and it's going to show.
These are just some of the tools. We're not going to go over these today, but there's always the LinkedIn. Obviously, when you're looking at salaries, you can go to PayScale and salary.com because maybe you want to kind of know what's the gauge in the market for that industry and for a position that you're in. There's research tools too. So you can go to ONET, the Vault Career Insider to kind of do more research based on that industry or that type of job and can give you more of an idea of what to expect in that type of role. Are there any other tools, Megan, that you've seen or you've seen your candidates use that you would recommend?
I know on the resume side of the house, there are a couple of really good tools you can use. As far as job search, I know there's some new AI things that are coming out in the DC area, but I think they're still in their infancy. So TBD on that.
Yeah, great. And we'll talk a little bit about AI a little bit later in this presentation as well. So more preparation, again, some things that you should research. Obviously, it's the job. So you don't ever want to go into an interview not understanding what the job entails, at least the basics of the job. Again, what are the trends? What's a realistic salary too? So you want to have an understanding of what you're getting yourself into. The size, location, structure, that plays a big part in organizations. What is their projected growth? What types of clients do they have? What are the services that they offer? And then again, as we mentioned earlier, the relationship to their competitors. Some competitors even actually work together. They're subcontractors together. So having that understanding over there. Details, like really knowing the knowledge of the job, qualifications, and so forth. And then with the trends, what are the industry issues? What are the new technologies? Anything to add, Megan, on this one?
Yeah, I mean, new technologies is definitely where it's at right now, considering how big AI has become and trying to wrap our heads around it. How do we present it to our potential clients in a way that's rational and marketable? That is big right now. So if you can learn as much as you can about that topic now, I would advise it just because it's going to be even greater in the future.
There's an applicant tracking system that all employers use. And it allows them to easily weed out the people and as they get hundreds and hundreds of resumes. So sometimes when your formatting is not aligned, or maybe you use one of those fancy formats where it's cut in half, I wouldn't recommend doing that because a lot of times when it goes to the applicant tracking system, it'll read it incorrectly. It'll almost read like it's one sentence from this side, one sentence from that side, and it'll cut off your experience. So, stick with the traditional formats and stuff and make it simple and easy for any computer or any ATS system, plus the individual, obviously, to be able to read it.
And I think that kind of reinforces the idea of reaching out to the recruiters because if your resume is tossed in a pile and lost in the sauce somewhere, that could be your foot in the door that otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah. I saw a resume one time that was aesthetically, it looked very nice. But then I could tell right away that, okay, this isn't going to pass through the system. So like Megan said, if that person actually, if they had reached out to me, I probably would have spoken to them and say, hey, you got a really good background. I'm going to speak to the hiring manager, but here's what I would suggest that you do in the future. Because if I didn't see it first, you wouldn't have been looked at. So more preparation. We don't have to go over all of these things, but definitely read the job announcement, look at what the key things is, and then be able to tell your story. Be prepared to tell your story on how you fit with what's required for the company. So that's a little bit of the preparation there. More preparation. These are common questions. I've rarely seen an interview where they didn't ask the question, tell me about yourself. That's the common first question usually. But these are just some that you can utilize to prepare for, and then some examples of, from the following class projects. So have things ready that you have, what you've done in school, student organization activities, if you're in athletics, the athletic stuff, anything you've done part-time, internships and so forth. And always try to use, if you can't always do this, but use the STAR approach, which is, if for those of you who don't know it, it's the situation, look at the tasks, look at the action, and what often many people forget is just sharing what was the result on that. So don't just tell the employer what you did or the action that you did, but why? Why was that impactful? What made a
Yeah.
difference in that?
I definitely had interviews where there were 10 questions and each one of them was shaped sort of like, tell me about a time when you faced a challenge. And it wasn't just one part, right? It was, what was the situation? What did you do? And what was the outcome? So like the STAR approach, right? The situation, what did you have to do? What was the action that you did? And then what was the result? They want to see the arc of the story. They want to see from beginning to end how you were impactful and how you behaved. And then they want to see that consistency across the questions, right? So you need to have examples of certain situations that you've been in where it showed your true talents so that that can be conveyed correctly to the people that want to hire you.
Yeah, no, that's a great, and practice is always good. And we provide that, in our office as well, if you ever need help with mock interviews. Angel or Angel, you have a question?
It's Angel. For those kinds of questions, I know it would be preferable if you have an example or a story of when you did it, when you when that question applies to you in a professional work or academic setting. Um, but what if the example, the story of, let's say, a challenge you faced was outside of professional and academic careers? What if it was
Personal.
a yeah, more
Mhm.
personal third party organization, something you do not for your career, but more so in your free time because you're very, very passionate about it.
Oh
Sports,
yeah.
let's say, for
Any
example.
anything that highlights you and how you're different from like other people, and like if you volunteer or if you work at a religious center, or anything that you can kind of highlight your skill set, even if it's outside of a professional zone, I think is still completely applicable.
It's a little more on preparation. Always have prepared copies of your resume. If you have good resume paper, use good resume paper because it stands out stronger. They do not give them your references unless they ask for it. You don't have to put it on your resume, but have that ready in case they do ask for it. Have something where you can put your notes and the job description. Invest in a padfolio. You don't want to come into an interview carrying a huge backpack and things, but that padfolio that has your resume in there maybe has some questions that you've actually jotted down in preparation for the interview. Some of those stories that we were talking about earlier, so that you could share those stories. You don't, again, have to open it up when you're in the interview, but at least you have it prepared as you arrive to the interview, and as you're waiting for the interviewer to come in, you can get your thoughts put together. Always bring a notepad and a pen. Plan your dress too the night before if you can. Use conservative colors. Don't try to be too flashy, too drastic. Plan your route. This is a big thing. And how are you going to get there? Make sure you give yourself enough time to get to the interview. I know I myself, my first job right out of college, I got in a car accident the day of my interview, and I thought that was it. I'm done. I'm finished. But you so plan the time, or also plan how you're going to respond to that. So in that case, what I responded, I was going to say, I'm going to be calm, I'm going to be collected, I'm going to tell the true story of what happened, and then I'm going to focus on why I'm good for this opportunity and why they should listen to me, instead of being panicky or being like, oh my gosh, I just lost this, it's all over, it's done. I'm already going to go in there with the wrong mindset. So tell yourself that you're ready, you're the best person for this opportunity, and I have my story that is worth them hearing and me telling.
Right. And have the contact information of who you need to call in case you are running late or there is an emergency situation or you can't find the right suite that you're supposed to be in. Just have that POC's number handy just in case.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then prepare a list of questions. The worst thing that you can do in an interview when it's all done and they've asked you all the questions to you is, and they ask you, do you have any questions for us? Is to say, no, I don't have anything. You really want to prepare questions that show you're curious, show that you want to learn not only about the person, but about the organization too, and have that prepared. There's a lot of those type questions that are floating around on the internet. You can even ask friends of what they've gone through, ask employers as you meet them, what are some of the things you're looking at? But there's so many different things. Megan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it's important to be curious and mindful with your questions so that it does look like you prepared, and that you're very interested, not just you show up, you answer the questions and you're done. You want to leave a lasting impression, and asking really pointed questions that get to what you have in mind. Like, hey, I would really like to lean in on this area of my future career. Are there opportunities for that within your firm? And then they'll have a wealth of answers for you, and it starts a really great conversation. So any like icebreaker opening questions that are going to continue the conversation can be very helpful.
So these are some questions that you can ask them. So again, you'll get this presentation. So these are just some examples. You can even make it your own too. And I would encourage you to make it your own. Again, as we both said, be curious about them and ask them anything that you're really wanting to know. Based on the research that you did, based on what they might have told you during the interview, based on what you might have seen in the office, if you're in the office, ask those type of questions. So these are just some examples of things you can ask. During the interview, again, arrive early, definitely arrive earlier. Even if you're arriving 30 minutes early, you can always sit in the car, in the parking lot, if it's an in-person interview. I know I've done it where I've walked out because it was a beautiful day and I walked around the campus just to get a taste and feel for what are people like that are arriving at the office. How do they look? Are they happy? Are they collaborating with each other? So it gives me a sense of the culture of the organization as well. But make sure you're early. It's better to be early than late. Greet them if they are accepting of handshakes with a firm handshake and smile. Make that eye contact. Make sure that you're giving that eye contact consistently with the natural breaks. And then answer your questions completely. Be direct, concise. Don't ramble around. Don't be just hogging all the attention in the conversation. And pause. If you have to pause, make sure that you pause. Speak clearly with the appropriate volume and pace. If you're a fast talker, just kind of slow down a little bit. Slow down. Control any nervous habits. So I've seen this. I just was doing an interview with someone the other day, and it was so distracting because they were just tapping their foot constantly. Their leg was moving, and that's all I could see. So I zoned out, and I couldn't even listen to what they were saying. So be aware of all of those different things. Megan, is there anything else that you've seen or any other suggestions?
It's a natural human condition to get nervous when you care about something and you're kind of feeling like you're on the spot. Breathing is very helpful, like that square breathing where you're like in for 4, out for 6. Slow, like you said, slow things down. They want to know you, they want to hear from you. And you want to put your best foot forward to show that you're capable. And don't let the nerves, take you down to a point where that's not really you. Whether you get the job or you don't get the job, there will be another opportunity to interview. So you got to kind of get comfortable in that place of being on the spot. And also getting those sideways questions that you're not expecting. You kind of have to be able to just on the fly answer things that you hadn't already prepared. So just, try to be yourself.
These are more things during the interview. Definitely be an active listener. If ask them in the beginning, is it okay if I jot down notes? Most likely they're going to say yes. That's fine. Ask about hiring timeline. You mentioned that, Ryan, in your question. You can ask about that hiring timeline. If you can, you definitely should try to get the contact information. The reason why, that's very important for the thank you note. And you should always send a thank you after the interview. Never not do that. It really shows, number one, an opportunity that you listen to what they said. And it also helps an opportunity. I tell you, a lot of people forget to do it and they don't do it. And if you're equal to someone else, the person that did it will probably get the job. Megan, have you had experience with that?
Yeah, we don't really have business cards anymore, right? Everything is kind of virtual. So making sure you have their email address is very important for that follow-up of, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure getting to know more about the company. I'm excited to hear from you in the future, those kinds of things. But yeah, I think it's very important to follow up. I've had people not follow up, and it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth of like, wow, I guess they really didn't want this, or maybe they just didn't know. But now you all know, so there's no excuse for not following up.
So this is just some tips about pre-recorded or virtual interviews. Make sure your name is displayed correctly. If you choose to use pronouns, use those pronouns. Close all other tabs and put yourself on mute. Minimize background noise. That's huge. So make sure you're in a place where you don't have a lot of noise or a lot of people coming in and going. And be sure, the background looks professional. You can use the GMU backgrounds or whatever background that's out there. I've seen where people have done interviews where they have their clothes closet open right behind them. Very distracting. Yeah,
and I think it's okay on your backgrounds to make it a little bit personal. Like we had the Olympics in our backgrounds recently for all of our Zoom calls and team meetings. But be careful with that. You still want to keep it professional. You don't want, your closet open behind you, like Jay said. But it's okay to have a little bit of personality too, because it's a conversation starter.
This is more pre-career, alert your roommates and pets. I've seen pets come into interviews quickly, and we love to see pets, but not during the interview. Center yourself again, just make sure that you're facing the camera and that they can see you clearly and that you have the appropriate light. Check the video quality and so forth. Those are, common things to do. So pre-recorded and virtual interview tips. Don't read from a script, because, again, you have your notes and it's good that you have prepared and you've put your story together, but the interviewer usually can tell if the person's here and then they're kind of looking or they're looking at the other screen and then they mention what they're saying and you totally look like you're just reading out of a script. Megan, any thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, there's a lot of times where I'm presenting and I'll have my notes on the screen above. And I just make sure I'm comfortable with the material going into it rather than relying on the notes. If I slip and I need a little bit of help, it's there for me, but I'm not relying on it completely. And I think that's probably the best for an interview is to make sure you're, like we said, well prepared. You've rehearsed it. You're comfortable with all of your answers so that you don't have to rely on that piece of paper.
Yeah, definitely test the quality of the video before you even get on to the actual one. Practice again. You can schedule an appointment with us anytime that we're open and we have appointments. We do encourage you to do that. I myself, as well as my colleagues, we've done that for several individuals already. We also have, when we talk about AI, a program called Costello Career AI Theo, and you can have access to that as a Costello College of Business student, where you can rehearse your interviews or your elevator pitch or whatever you might want to. As long as you have a webcam, you can get through that. And I think the next slide will show you how you can get access to that. And research the company's interview questions. And a lot of times they're out, they might even send it to you ahead of time, but if they don't send it to you ahead of time, a lot of it is out there on the internet where you can find out what are the typical questions that an organization asks. Any other thoughts, Megan?
I highly recommend the mock interview process. I think it's super helpful. I know I did that when I was a student and I went through career services that helped me find an interview at Northrop Grumman that became my first job. So shout out to what you do, Jay, and in your field and your division, I think is super helpful to the students and they should take every advantage they can to try to use that.
Yeah, thank you. And so here's the Costello Career AI. If you screenshot the QR code, and again, we'll send this to you. So if you don't do it now, you can do it later, or if you don't want to do it now, you can do it later. But it's a great tool where you can get the you can master your technical interviews. You can put specific interview scenarios. So maybe I bombed an interview before and I wanted to learn from it. So I can put the same questions that I was asked and I could practice it and get it better the next time. So this is just one example of a great tool that we have that you should utilize if you would like to. So AI, we talked a little bit about the AI. It doesn't replace person-to-person mock interviews and so forth. It gives you a chance to, examine, for star statements. So you can look it up, you can look up things and it'll give you some examples of what you could potentially say, but you obviously want to make it your own. So ensure that you don't just cut and paste or you don't just put a prompt into ChatGPT or any other AI tool, and then you utilize what they say. You want to make it your own and you want to make it uniquely to you and unique to your story, but you can utilize it to get some ideas. Again, don't share any private information too on AI, because if you do, it's all up there for those folks to see. Avoid the plagiarism. Definitely don't just cut and paste, because I think employers will definitely see that. Megan,
Yeah.
any experience with that?
Definitely. AI kind of spits out a generic statement and they all kind of are similar. And now employers are starting to realize the same words keep coming through. Oh, that must be from AI, not from an actual individual. So I think what you do, what we typically see that works well, put your own words and language in it, give it your own personality, and then ask for it to be a little more concise or a little more professional or just a little bit tweaked, but it still has the flavor of who you are, rather than just saying, answer these questions for me.
So many ways again to use it. As Megan just said, be sure to use this for ideas only. And it is good for ideas, but it shouldn't be the end all be all. So these are just some prompts. You'll get this presentation again too, but it's like, how can I prepare for common interview questions for XYZ role? The STAR statement. Here's more prompts. Again, I'm not going to read them all here, but what are 3 strengths I can address? So many different things that you could ask to get a little bit of help and aid to shape your story. So packaging and presentation. Here's really what you want to tell an employer. Number one, you want to show Deloitte, whoever that you apply to, that you have experience and skills. And that experience doesn't always have to be from job experience with internships and so forth. As we talked about a little bit earlier, if you have something that you're passionate about, you're involved in the community, and you've done something that's great, that is very relevant and tied, like Megan said, the Olympics. So maybe I volunteered with the Olympics, or maybe I was actually there, and I can say I saw the Deloitte signs and everything. I was really impressed, and I maybe even got fortunate. I met someone who worked from there. Again, it's part of the preparation where you are able to tell the story and show your experience and your skills. It's up to you, again, to work on how to package it and present it. So you want, as Megan said earlier, you want to be your authentic self. You don't want to package it and copy it or ask your friend. It's like, what did you do? Or what did you tell Deloitte? Or how did you present yourself? And maybe you want to learn from that experience, but then you want to make it your own. So it's not just cutting and paste and copying what someone else did or what you think they want you to say as well. You want to say it because it's genuinely coming from you. What are you bringing to the table? So what is it that makes you unique out of the hundreds of people that Megan might be meeting? Something that's going to capture her attention and she's going to remember you.
And maybe you're in the middle of something and you haven't finished a specific class or you haven't finished a degree or you're still working on a certificate. You can talk about that, right? If it's not on your resume as a bullet yet, that's okay to still say, I'm really excited about this new skill that I'm learning online, or I'm really close to finishing the certification that I will have on my resume soon. To just show them that you're still leaning in, even if it's not 100% where you would like it to be, you're still working towards a goal. That's very important to highlight.
So that's really important things to think about as you're packaging and presenting your experience during an interview. We talked about the STAR method. We don't have to go into too much detail of this, but I think the biggest thing is really how can you showcase not just what you did, but what was the result in the end? Because if you can quantify things, you can't always quantify things, but if you can, it's always nice to see the quantification of your accomplishments. Any thoughts on that, Megan?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's very helpful for people that haven't gotten to know you or haven't seen you before to give those statements of, oh, I ended up helping save 40% on, every product package that we bought recently because of this new spreadsheet that I created or this new process flow or whatever you did to create that result. If you can turn it into a number figure, I got 17 people hired in my last firm because of the recruiting that I helped with, like that, those kinds of numbers are really big depending on what your field is to get your point across a little bit better. And it, like you said, doesn't have to be a number, right? It could be, people were happier because I served them well as a waitress. My customer review feedback was 100%. That anything that can kind of turn your story into something a little bit more impactful is huge.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, use it in every interview because it really makes it more impactful. Don't forget that result. This is just an example to give you a little bit of a look, and you'll get this presentation again too. But so this person's showing their situation and what they did when they were in their final year of business school and where they are. This is the task. They were the team lead for that task, and they're presenting a little bit of what they did for their professors and for their project. Then it goes into the action. So what did they do? They did weekly check-ins. They delegated responsibilities, reached out to the alumni that were working in the field. So that's their action. And then finally, what was the result? This is the big thing. They completed the project on time, had the highest score in class, and they had strategic recommendations that were later adopted.
And try to pull from your relevant experience, even if you were not a leader, say, well, I haven't led a team, but I've been part of a team, and here's what my role was, and here's how I collaborated and made it even better for us to be a working group, led to us being a successful group together that we got picked up for another project. Something like along those lines where you can kind of pivot a little bit and just still highlight your experience and make it look like relevant.
And then, as we mentioned earlier, even too, for your preparation, prepare for a variety of stories to showcase. So don't just have one story. Look at your whole experience and have several stories that you're ready and prepared to ask, showing that how you problem solved, how you did communication, conflict resolution, or any topic that you feel that's going to be very important to the employer. And you can get a feel for that, again, through your research of the organization, looking at what their values are, and seeing the job description on what are the key things that that organization is looking for. So focus on your individual contribution too. So it's nice that you're a team player, and it's good to say we did this or we accomplished that. But when you're interviewing and you're the one that wants to get that opportunity, you want to use as much of those I statements to show how, as Megan has just mentioned in that example of what you did to lead the team, you want to be able to say, I did this, this, and that. This is what I had helped to accomplish. Yes, it was part of a team, but I played this role during that achievement. And then whenever possible, quantify the result, as we had mentioned earlier. So that's a little bit of the STAR method. It can be very powerful and very useful. We're not going to do this activity, but you'll have this presentation, and I encourage you to actually do this activity. It's a video that shows someone going through an interview, and there's some mistakes in that interview, and there's visual mistakes as well. And so usually we would show this video, but in lieu of time, and I want to utilize Megan's time and her expertise, I'm going to turn that off. I would go and look at that in your spare time. And that's already some of the stuff that we're about.
Thought I was watching SpongeBob for a minute there.
Yeah. So it gives you the answers already ahead of time, but it's there. So this is behavioral interviews are one of the biggest type of interviews that most employers utilize at one point or another in the interview process. These are some of the big questions that many employers ask and that you should be prepared to answer. I'm not going to read them all here, but Megan, are there any ones here that you stand out, or ones that you don't see here that you've been like, yeah, we probably would ask this in our organization?
Definitely, what do you know about Deloitte comes up in our interviews, because we want to know your frame of reference and why you were interested in joining in the first place. How much homework you've done, how much dedication you have to being part of this firm versus another firm. Does it really matter to you? What brought you to us in the first place, kind of thing. And then your goals, you should really highlight, the intent that you have. Are you going to have a long career here? Do you just like this one job? Do you realize that, you jump from project to project when we are with this firm? Or is this one role that you're going to have for a very long time? It's good to try to align yourself with the job and the company.
Great. Thank you. It's important to be aware of these too. These are unlawful questions. These are questions that an employer shouldn't be asking you. They shouldn't ask you about your age, your race, gender, country of origin, religion, and so forth. All of those things that are listed on here, they have no business asking you, and they shouldn't be asking you. These are examples of things that you might hear them ask, and they shouldn't be asking those questions. Ryan, do you have your hand up?
Thank you. So I personally, I'm just going to say I have Tourette's, but I know that sometimes I don't want to make it awkward in interviews, like when I have tics and they're like, what's wrong? But is it okay for me to disclose that, I have a disability in there? Like, or like, what would you say?
Megan, your thoughts on that?
I haven't really run into that.
Okay.
I don't have I if someone came to me for an interview and they wanted to say up front, hey, I don't want to offend you. But anything I say, I have this issue and I sometimes do XYZ. Please don't pay any attention to that. I don't think that would be an issue. I think what Jay is trying to highlight is that they shouldn't be asking you those questions up front. I know that Deloitte does have questionnaires that they ask before interviews that they send out from HR that ask about citizenship, just because we have sensitivities in the firm about that. Do you need a green card? Can you work in the US? And like, I think a lot of employers ask those questions too, just to understand the nature of the person that they're dealing with. But again, they shouldn't be asking you those questions in a person-to-person interview.
Yeah, so here's some lawful questions. So as Megan just said about the citizenship, so there is a case where they need to ask about that because of the work that they do, and Deloitte is an example of that. So they can ask you, can you show proof of citizenship? They're not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking, are you a citizen? I'm asking you,
Right.
can you show proof? And all these different questions that they can ask you, and don't be surprised if they do ask you these questions. Location. Don't assume where the company's located. Definitely check the address. I've seen people go to different places,
Mm-hmm.
and then they call you on the phone, and they're in the other building that's across the ways. So double check that all the time, and again, give yourself enough time, or go the night before and check to see where the place is. Arrive 10 to 15 minutes early, as we mentioned. We were going to do this again. We don't have to do this today here, but this is just things when you're practicing interviews, really understand your strengths, be able to give examples, understand what your weaknesses are too, because that's the correlation. They might ask you, well, tell me about a weakness. And how can you give a good answer to that question that turns it into maybe a positive? And then tell me a time when you worked as a team and so forth. But these are just some common practice questions.
And you'll see these questions again in your career, because I was just on a panel for the new analysts in Deloitte last week, and that was the question I was asked, was like, tell me about a project that either was challenging or didn't go as planned, and what did you do, and what would you give advice on? So as you start to collect more experience, you'll be helping other people understand what you went through to try to help them with the same situations.
Yeah. So now we talked about what to bring. There's the portfolios or padfolios. If you have a nice professional briefcase, you're welcome to bring the briefcase, and then have your resumes in hand for sure. Bring a couple copies just in case you meet someone that you weren't expected to meet, just so that they will have a copy as well. Then what to wear. This is just some examples here of professional dress. It's better to be overdressed professionally than underdressed. But these are just some quick examples of professional dress versus casual dress.
Unless they specifically say what to wear, because some places are very casual these days. I know my husband recently joined a new company, and they're kind of an investment financial startup. So they don't really wear suits and ties anymore. But make sure you know that going into it, so that you're not like an odd duck walking into the building.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point, Megan, because when I lived in Hawaii, I came in a suit because I came from the East Coast, and everyone looked at me like I was crazy wearing a suit. So
one of the things that I appreciate is when people kind of break out of their shell and they become human. So they talk about, you're not supposed to talk about age and race and all of those things. I understand that, but they talk about things that are personal to them. Maybe they talk about a pet or a trip that they're taking, something that connects you to them, right? So maybe you both went to the same school, or you both, supported the same charity function, some kind of thing that connects you to this person so they don't forget you. And whether that's through a professional experience or a personal experience, I think it's important to try to build a relationship as quickly as possible, so that it will differentiate you. Like, oh yeah, against all these 6 people, this one guy was so personable and such a good connector. We would want to put him in front of clients. I know for me personally, as a Deloitte employee, that means a lot to me. Knowing that you can go out on your own and talk to people and not embarrass me is very important.
Yeah, no, that's great that you say that, Megan, because I know when I was in a similar firm, I think to stand out, it's really, what is that hook in the beginning? Like, what are you telling me in the beginning that's different from the average candidate that's out there. So I'll give you just one example. There was someone that we were recruiting when I was at PwC, and he had spent a whole year traveling and starting up a band, seeing the world, and he actually created an album during that time, and he saw many different places, and he told me how he learned about these cultural differences and how he said he wanted to do this before he started his professional career because he knew that he would regret not doing that. And then he told me not only that he did that, it wasn't just like a boondoggle or anything. He told me about how he learned so much more about himself, about other people, and how he felt that could contribute to what we do, as we were a global firm working with a lot of different individuals. I immediately was like, I got to get this guy, or I want to
That's a
learn
great
more about this
example.
guy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Great example.
so when you
Become a
have,
person.
yeah, exactly. He's human. He's telling me that he did something and he wanted to take the chance. He wanted to take the risk. He knew it was going to be a year of his life on delay, but he also knew that he was good enough and strong enough to take that experience and then have no regrets, but also to use it at our firm, which is what he ended up doing. Are there any other questions before we close off? As I mentioned, we will be sending this presentation to all of you. I really want to thank Megan for her time and her expertise. She's definitely a strong supporter of us and a great alum, and someone that you definitely should connect with and keep in touch with.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Jay. I've enjoyed talking with all of you, and I hope you got something out of this that you can use in the future. Good luck.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll hopefully see you again in the future.